My name is Brad Skeen. I'm the Director of Enterprise Architecture, and welcome, and I appreciate you coming to my session. We're going to be talking about, is your technology speeding up your company or slowing it down? And I'm guessing I know the answer based on your attendance. So this is a picture of me a long, long time ago. They stopped using the Duck Dynasty picture, but that was probably a more accurate representation of late. Just so I get to know who's in the room, I asked if you please raise your hand if you have a sales role within your organization. Nobody in that bucket. How about marketing? Okay, about half of you, a little more than half. Operations? A few more. Technology? I see a few that fit this last category if you raised your hand more than once. Okay, that's good to see. We like to see that there's some overlap and there's some synergy because a lot of these different roles are pervasive throughout an organization, not just technology, but especially technology. So today I'm going to get really abrasive right in the beginning, ask you, what's your problem? And then we're going to discuss some of the promises of technology. What was it supposed to do for your organization? We'll go through some examples of the good, the bad, and the ugly, and then I will explain some sizing and solution architecture. We'll talk through what a typical solution anatomy looks like, and what transition looks like, and then explain how and when you should evolve as an organization. So as promised, let's start off with what's your problem. And I'm going to ask everybody to participate just this one time. Please stand up. Oh, God. I won't make you do this many times, but I'm going to have you sit back down if your technology solutions fall into these different categories. So sit back down if your technology solution would be accurately described as a disaster, whether that's by your staff or your customers. Oh, good. Okay, we don't have any real fires going on right now. If your technology solution is broken or costing the organization money. You guys must be Americaneagle.com clients. This is great. How about if it costs far more than they should? Okay, all right. Starting to get there. If your technology solutions are not producing the revenue that they should. Okay, all right. How about if your technology solutions need to improve to enable your organization to grow? All right. I got rid of everybody else so we don't fall into our good but not great yet. And I have to send you to another presentation because I have nothing to talk to you about category. So that's great. So what I want to do is start to compartmentalize what the problems are with your technology. So I want you to meditate for a moment on your specific technology and what are the challenges you would like to overcome. And let's decide which one of these buckets they fall into. You probably have seen this exercise before, but there are different ways we can categorize here. It might be something that you know. Okay, so you understand the problem and you can identify the problem. It might be something that you don't know. Okay, so you can identify the problem, but you don't really understand it or how to fix it. It might be something that you don't know that you know, and in this case, it's a little bit more abstract. These are things that you know how to fix, but you're not able to identify that this is your particular problem. And they might fall into the category of, I don't know what I don't know. Really not sure what the problem is or how to fix it. So in thinking about your own issues or your own challenges with tech and what you're trying to overcome, how many of you would fall into that first category? Okay, so in this case, it's usually time or budget that's holding you back. We know what the problem is, we know how to address it, we just can't seem to get to it. So that's one of the common things. There might be other reasons holding you back, and we can discuss those further if we have some time here toward the end. That second category, how many people know what you don't know? You recognize or understand, you know the problem, but you don't understand exactly how to fix it. So this is where you need to find a resource, right? So in Captain Kirk's case, I'm going to call out Scotty, something's going on with the engine, or I need warp speed in 3 minutes, or we're all going to be dead. That's the kind of thing where you know the problem, but you know you're not the right person to fix it. How about you don't know that you know? I'd be surprised if anybody can really identify that they're in this category. But this would be one of those situations where there might be an elephant in the room, but everybody seems to not see it. And so we're unable to identify it. And in this case, you might need a consultant or somebody to just help from the outside to assess the situation. You might be a little too close to it. And then that final category, you probably don't know where to start. Are the rest of us in this category? Not really sure how to address the problem. We don't know where to start. So what are the promises of technology? What were we supposed to get out of this digital age? Well, first and foremost, speed. So your organization should be faster as a result of your digital solutions, your technology. We should be able to be multi-threaded. I don't have to have a one-on-one sales relationship with every customer. Every customer doesn't have to wait in line in order to check out. We have e-commerce, we have opportunities for everything to be multi-threaded. Automation should make things a lot faster, whether that's operationally or for your customers. Things should be pushed along through a process because of your technology. You should have more accuracy as a result of data being entered once and reused, and integration makes that possible. So systems talking to one another instead of humans having to be involved in every step of a process. Another promise is intelligence. We should be smarter as an organization because of the technology we're using. That starts with the insights we can gather from data. A lot of companies are gathering data, few companies are looking at that data. And a lot fewer than that are even using that data to make their decisions driving forward. We've been talking about data-driven decisions for decades at this point. It's starting to happen with some large organizations, but it definitely needs focus, and in a lot of cases, a resource to actually take care of that. Business intelligence, where you start to visualize insights from the data itself and use that to drive your organization to be smarter. And then finally, if it's applicable, getting into the point of machine learning and AI in order to assist you with becoming smarter as an organization. Scalability, one of the big promises of technology, and that's one of those places we usually succeed, but not always. So you should be able to accommodate more sales, more interaction, more engagement, more orders, while maintaining a lean staff. How many people maybe have an experience where you're driving more business because of your technology, but it means you have to hire more people to accommodate? Okay, we have a hand going up. We should get more spread. You should be able to be global as a result of the internet, if that's appropriate for your business. So geographically, you shouldn't be held in anymore. Your technology should help you to spread in that regard. You should be able to break through language barriers as a result, if that's appropriate for your organization. And you have the opportunity to be 24/7, 365 because of the web. And technology should certainly offer convenience, both to your customers and to your employees. Sometimes we miss half that equation, sometimes we miss the whole thing. We'll talk a little bit about that. But automation, personalization, things like suggestions and predictability all come into play when it is in relation to convenience from technology. So evaluating success, you want to look at these different areas, and you really do want to scrutinize. It's easy to have a perception that you're succeeding and actually be wrong. So we want to be fairly critical. We use a case study here. All the examples I use today are based on my experience. Some of those are clients of American Eagle, but they're not all about one client. It's a mixed blend experience. So if you see something that's related to your experience, don't think I'm calling you out. Some of these are very, very common issues. But we'll call this unsimple tech. And basically, this is a provider of subscription-based maintenance service for home appliances. So for your home, you can sign up with them and they will do an annual contract with you, come into your home at a certain interval and service given appliances within your home. Their initiative with technology is they wanted to provide an online tool for both new and existing customers so they could manage all of those subscriptions in one place for convenience. They put together this following process. Person logs into the website, or creates an account rather on the website. They add their address. They search for and select an appliance that they own. They select a related service for that appliance. And then they repeat that cycle so that they can put all the appliances that they want serviced into their account. They progress to a provide payment information screen so they can complete an e-commerce transaction. And then they schedule a service appointment. With a show of hands, how many people would feel that this solution would achieve speed? That's good. Maybe one hand in the room went up. That's good. That's about what I expect. How about intelligence? Make us smarter. Think about, with some scrutiny, did it provide us scalability? Did it provide us a spread, an opportunity to be more widespread? Did it provide convenience? Our recommendation with this particular model is that it might be very convenient for someone who's already a customer and who didn't have to walk through this process themselves through the web to go into a place where they could log in and make adjustments to their existing account and through their subscriptions. But the process of looking for their specific appliance, selecting it along with a service, and then filling it out was actually more difficult than their existing business process, which was fairly successful. Commonly, they were getting called, and they would perform a service within a home, and at that time, they would have the upsell and cross-sell opportunity to say, we can service all your appliances, and they would walk through this process hand in hand with their customer. In this case, that manual effort was a lot more accurate and much more successful from the sales standpoint. Convenient for the customer. They were assured that what they were doing was more accurate. So we definitely want to scrutinize. A lot of times we want to digitize the process, and it doesn't always make sense to do that. We also want to be able to successfully measure whether or not that initiative did what it was supposed to do, and did it deliver on the technology promises. In order to do that properly, you want to define success at the beginning of the initiative. What's the problem we're trying to solve? or what is the case that we're trying to accomplish, and what does success will look like. And then you need to determine what metrics are going to be involved in measuring that success. So in this case, we have the problem of a website having terrible performance. And the goal that we want, success looks like less than 0.2 of a second per page load. What metrics go into that? Page speed overall, and that breaks down into a lot of increments, only a few of which I've listed here. DNS lookup speed, time to start render speed, requests per second, etc. All of the things that might slow down a web page as it's loading. And there can be tons of different things to look at in this regard. But this is a sort of planning that we want to do in front of initiatives so that we know what success looks like and what we're trying to achieve. And again, gauge it against those technology promises. So when you're scoring your success in your tech initiatives, here's some of the things to look out for and that might be indicators that you're falling short. In the speed category, people can't find what they're looking for. How many people have heard that from a customer? I'm on your website, I can't find it. How many have had that experience themselves? We've all been there, right? There's bad development. So it might be a terrible user experience, might have errors. It might be an implementation that ultimately was a failure. You have added complexity overall. So where we were trying to make things simpler, we actually made it harder. And then we have an issue where things don't talk to one another. The systems don't talk to one another. And that lack of integration starts to slow you down because manually we need to get data from one system to another for them all to operate properly. In the intelligence category, if you don't have a baseline to measure against, we're not really sure if we got smarter. So we want to start with some sort of baseline or at least some assumptions. If you have bad reporting or bad data, your opportunity to get smarter as a company is probably going to be the adverse in reality. And if you have repeat data entry, there's much more chance for there to be error and problems with your data. In the scalability area, if you've maxed out your fulfillment, in other words, we started to grow as an organization, but we got to the point where we couldn't process any more services or orders, whatever the case might be, without adding more human resources. Sometimes this is unavoidable, other times it can be avoided, or it can be supported by additional technology. If you think about automation in a company like Amazon, we're not all going to be at that point of a virtual warehouse. But ultimately, getting steps incrementally toward that may be necessary as you grow as an organization because of the tech. If you're adding processes overall that require human interaction, that can be problematic, increasing your staff, and obviously adding to your manual overhead. Spread is one of those things that you would assume is going to be great as soon as you go on the web, but if you have areas where there's no availability for your product or service, that can be a misnomer. Perhaps we're presenting things in the wrong language, or we're waiting on humans to perform some step in a process that could be automated. These are things that will limit your spread overall. There's also potential for service deserts, where we can't get to the potential customer the technology that they need. I have an interesting story that I don't have time for in that regard when it comes to working with Amish folks, but we'll get to that on another day. And then when it comes to convenience, you may be falling short if you're creating repeat steps and you're ending up in situations where there's actually slower processes in place. Manual effort gets to be irritating for your customers. We've all been through the experience of calling and receiving an automatic prompt on the other side saying, push this button, enter this number, give them information. You might punch in your telephone number, you might punch in a credit card number, and then 5 minutes later you're online with somebody on the phone who's talking to you and asks you for that same information. It causes a lot of friction, it's a huge inconvenience. That data not being retained between systems is similar. So let's talk through some examples of good, bad, and ugly. We'll use some more case studies here. In this case, working with a fairly good situation through an evolution of their technology, I call this EvolveCo LLC. So this is a training company. They provide traditional business that's more paper-based, less tech up front, very in-person business model. And they knew that they had to start to mature. And they started their process by bringing their marketing online, having a content website online, starting to capture leads. The threat that they started to experience was that there were competitors in their space that were starting to offer a lot more digital advancement and some digital tools that folks were attracted to. And so they started to ramp up, and they added additional services to their overall online offering. They added a customer relationship management system, marketing automation so that they didn't manually have to do all their communications, e-commerce so their transactions could take place online. They were finding tools to fill each one of these voids along the way. And then COVID hit. And this was a brand new threat for them, especially being traditionally paper-based and in-person. both of those things had to be completely transformed. As they sought our help, came to Americaneagle.com, we started consulting with them, took a look at what they have currently, and worked through strategically what is their roadmap to transform into their desired future state. Multi-step, obviously, as they went along. So in assessing what they had today, it was, or at that time, it was very much like a patchwork quilt. They started with something that was very minor, and they started adding pieces into it. And did it work? Yes, arguably it worked. It was kind of stitched together. It didn't really have consistency between the different platforms and tools that they were using, and was starting to cause some problems from a maintenance standpoint. They had a lot of different vendors that they had to work with to accommodate all of these different tools, and to try to get the data they needed in order for them to report at an enterprise level, very difficult. So in working with us, we worked on evolving them into more of a pattern state. We evaluated the tools they had and started to replace the pieces that could evidently be replaced with something that would be more consistent, that their resource team could handle more, and that a single vendor could be more interfaced with. And ultimately brought them to a vision of how to completely digitize their business over time. So it's more like this patterned quilt that I'm providing here, the second image. Now an example of more of the bad. In this case, the company is Disintegrated Incorporated. They're an e-commerce and dealer, or I'm sorry, a dealer-supported art sales company. So they work through direct e-commerce and through a dealer base. Where they were in their maturity was basically, they had a single system that had been customized over time, built up, that was handling everything for them. So this was their content management system. It provided them some means to have SEO. It handled their e-commerce. It handled transactional emails for their client base. And it provided some marketplace interaction as well for selling on eBay, Walmart, Amazon. The threat they started running into is that their technology was breaking down, and they got to a point where they couldn't find where orders were going. They know that orders were placed, and they were not actually being found anywhere in their systems, or they're found in one place and not integrated into others where they should be. They were experiencing issues where they continuously had to patch and build into this custom solution. And this solution had really been built from someone who came on board novice as somebody directly out of college and started building an e-commerce system, and all of a sudden found himself as the CTO 7 years later of that same system, which has now been pieced together to be kind of like a Lego block system of many different things it's trying to do at once. Operationally, the overhead was becoming hard to accommodate. The technical debt was fairly extreme. They had a lack of integrations overall. And then the new threat that came into play is that resource that managed to title himself all the way to CTO found himself another job. And so they turned to American Eagle, and we engaged with them strategically, consulting, taking a look at what they had. Again, really trying to assess what is in place today and how can we help you. And ultimately what we found to be the current state in our analysis, their technology was manually supported by their IT solutions. So that's your solution in the middle is Bernie, for those of you who remember and are as old as me, being upheld and propped up by human beings. And largely that was not going to be anything that could scale over time. Their CEO made a decision to actually pause marketing and to stop the rapid growth of their business based on the fact that they would implode if they continued to work their current technology. And what we started to transition them into was more of a model that hopefully looked like Voltron. So we started bringing in services that each and of themselves were independently very good at what they did. These were best in breed when it came to CRM, when it came to CEO or SEO, when it came to content management, when it came to e-commerce. And pulling pieces out of their old system, short-circuiting what they were doing, and pushing those into known and provided commodities in these different applications. And then finally, we'll look at the ugly. And I call this one Shiny Squirrel Tech Company, because they were very easily distracted. So these guys were a high-end travel service provider. They had an e-commerce first approach to their business, so they started digital. And where they were with their maturity was that, again, a custom platform. They had services, application-level services that were custom built, and they were even building microservices for specific pieces of their architecture. They did content management, e-commerce, marketing, and even provided a customer portal all through these custom solutions. Their threat was that their costs of technology were really starting to skyrocket. And what we looked into and found, they had continuous changes in their architecture and their strategic direction based on the new shiny thing. So when their leadership found a new exciting innovation, they tried to bring it into their system. And it even got to the point where they separated their stack. So their staff was .NET, and they were largely a Microsoft house. And the leadership decided that Ruby on Rails was really exciting and new and fresh, and they built an offshoot application in Ruby on Rails and then tried to start a transition that would take the whole company that direction. Well, of course, their resources didn't know that particular technology. They weren't able to uphold and support it. So then they were calling in contractors to support one piece of their technology while they continued on building the other. What they were doing wasn't the right thing for the size of their company. And what I mean by that is mentioning microservices. That's the kind of thing you get into when you have a massive amount of load on a technology system to the point where it's starting to break down, and you need to parse off some portion of it so that the whole system doesn't break down. We're talking about a separate application for login, a separate application for order history, the kind of things Amazon needs to do that the vast majority of organizations do not need to do. And they had a blend of new and legacy systems that caused a lot of overhead. They had accumulated a ton of technical debt. And then their new threat that came into play was resource retention. So similar to the last company, in this case, they started to experience turnover of many members of the staff. And as they bring somebody in and they would get acclimated with this really wonky architecture, they'd find a new job in the next 6 to 8 months because they didn't want to live in that space that long. So our assessment here in the beginning was very much like it's the Jetsons meet the Flintstones, right? We've got everything from old age to new age, and we're trying to cobble it all together and make some cohesive sense of it. And the direction we ended up taking them was more evolved, bringing them into a service-oriented architecture. Hopefully, like The Force Awakens, we're really empowering their staff to do what they do very well. So talking about right sizing and determining what's the right solution architecture for you overall, I credit the next couple slides here to my colleague Derek Swick, who made a really nice visual of a sort of a progression and a timeline for organizations. Most start off in some capacity non-tech, whether that's because the company isn't formed yet and it's just an idea, or because they started traditionally offline. But then very quickly you'll move into having content online. You might have a catalog, you might be showing your products or your services, you're not yet selling them, but you might need a content management system and you're providing that sort of available information to your customers. We all remember Al Gore's information superhighway, I hope. And then moving on from there into online selling. So now we move into e-commerce, and we're able to do those transactions online, and we're enabling more self-service from our customer base, which should bring a lot more transparency, or a lot more thrust of acceleration for our organization. And then from there, you really start to digitally transform. When you get to a point of technical synergy or digital synergy, now your front office and what you do with your organization, with your customers, it has some synergy with what has to happen in the back office. You're empowering your sales force with technology tools, and you're empowering full self-service with your customer base. And eventually that gets to the point where you're thinking digitally first in everything you're doing. At that point, we would consider you transformed. Some of the tools that you need along the way to accommodate that evolution: early in a business, use a lot of spreadsheets. Other files that might come into play, images, videos, PDFs, etc., but nothing that's online really at that point. And then once you bring your content on and you're starting to present some marketing opportunity online, a content management system is likely part of your arsenal right out of the gate, and also an email marketing system. These things are fairly well commoditized now, where there are a lot of options, some of them cheap, some of them expensive based on your need, but you'd probably want to jump right into those tool sets. And then once you sell online, an e-commerce platform is critical from a security and risk standpoint. You want to make sure that you've got something that's proven. Marketing automation will probably come into play right away there as well, so that you can start to get away from too much manual touch on the communications between you and potential or current customers. And you might have some back office things that start to develop at that point. Again, along the lines of relationships with your customers, a CRM may come into play. Then you'll move on into that transformation where back office, front office, everything starts to communicate, and we start giving those digital opportunities that will bring in things like additional channels, perhaps selling through marketplaces, perhaps some engagement with social. You might be on some shopping feeds. It might even get into mobile apps. You might need tools that are more sophisticated for managing your inventory, product information management, digital asset management, order management systems, inventory management systems. This is where things start to get a lot heavier into digital. There are 3 different architectures that we typically see. Monolithic, which is the all-in-one solution that we talked about with some of the examples. These are often on-premise. They're not really cloud-based very often. You're adding functions in over time, and the lens that you're using is probably at a project level. So you're thinking, what's the new need, the new functional set, and you're building into your monolithic solution. The next is service-oriented, and here we're separating out platforms and tools for each important service, like e-commerce, content management, customer relationship management, et cetera. This is often a combination of hosted and software as a service tools, and the lens here is usually business to enterprise level. And then if you get to the massive major enterprise level, the lens might get to the point of microservices. And this is where you're separating concerns down to the level of functionality, like I mentioned before. I'm going to skip through these next slides in the interest of time, because I know we had to start a few minutes late. If you want to go through this information, it'll be provided in the handout that you get to take with you. But ultimately, one thing I do want to point out on each of these is when should you reevaluate your architecture. If you have a monolithic architecture, if you start to need customizations that you're finding are available out of the box from other cost-effective solutions, you might want to move into service-oriented at that point. If bugs become very common or the cost of maintenance is starting to exceed the budget that you have for improvements, that would be a red flag for sure. And if you have staff and vendor turnover that's causing problems, it might be another good opportunity to change your architecture up. SOA is a sweet spot for a lot of organizations that we work with. If you do get to a point where one service is coming under load and it's causing problems for the rest of your organization, then it might be time to make a change. What's nice about service-oriented is that I say monolithic is a lot like a Christmas light arrangement, where one light might go out and you might not even know which light it is, and as a result, your entire string is gone. Now we've updated that technology a bit with LEDs, where if a light goes out, maybe you lose the rest of the string after that light, but it's a little easier to identify. In a service-oriented architecture, if one node goes out, it should not have a great impact on the rest of what you're doing and the rest of the organization. So that's another good benefit. But if it does get to that point where you find that impact is impeding your forward progress as an organization, you might have to look into microservices for one piece or part of this. And that is, for microservices, something you evolve into based on need. If you started with microservices, then I would say, yes, definitely reevaluate right now. Because one thing I've never seen succeed is a medium or small size organization, even a large size organization, that starts their technology with the mindset that we're going to build everything as microservices. It's a lot to orchestrate, and it should organically build out of a different architecture as opposed to be the target from day one. So what does a typical solution anatomy look like? We'll start with a monolith, and I'll show kind of an example of how that could evolve into a better architecture, or a more advanced or evolved architecture. So in this case, we've got your monolith in the middle here with your content management, e-commerce, a search solution, and OMS. It's doing all these things. It's functional. It's not great at any of them, because it's not a standard or out-of-the-box solution for any of them in many cases. They have an ERP in the back office. That's very common. Customer data and orders need to go into some back office solution. Content relationship manager at this point has been added. And you've got analytics data shooting off to maybe like Google Analytics at this point. Instead of thinking, we're in big trouble, we've outgrown this, we've got to tear it all down and start over, and so that means that somebody's got to rebuild a new solution and then we'll flip a switch, a better approach is to piece by piece start to work this into the new architecture. So in this case, you could take out the search. A customized search is typically very bad in our experience in working with clients. And there are a lot of opportunities to plug into known tools that are out there at a reasonable price that are going to improve that experience a lot and result in a lot better engagement, a lot of return on investment. So that's one of the early things we usually look at transitioning. Next step might be to pull that content management out. If you built the content management system yourself, chances are it's really not very flexible. It's not a drag and drop interface. If it is, then you probably should spin that off as a product for technology. But ultimately, the tools that are available through the market will give that capability to empower your marketing team. And so that's another place where we see a lot of benefit in bringing a tool into play. It could start to communicate with your search and then ultimately be pushing your leads into your CRM. And each time we do something like this, we short circuit the old monolith and cut that functionality out. And then finally getting to a place where we replace the e-commerce system with a known tool there, as well as order management system. That orders can flow through that into the ERP, and this would be a good example of a service-oriented architecture for a middle-sized organization. So when should we evolve? How should we evolve? The when is easy to answer. It has to be all the time. You should always be looking for continuous improvement. But I will say your velocity needs to be throttled forward or back based on extremes, right? If we're having a huge amount of business impact, we might be at a different level. So I compartmentalized this a little bit, or categorized it. If you're in maintenance mode and life is good, that means that you're probably not getting a lot of inconveniences, definitely nothing for your customers. Maybe internally there's some inconveniences from time to time, and you might have infrequent complaints from your resources internally. But ultimately, all your business and customer needs are being met. Time to ramp up would be when you start seeing your spend climb for tech. Your innovations are getting paused so that you can deal with other pressing matters. You have some regular internal complaints occurring now, or some of your business needs are not being met by the tech. Call for backup. So in this category, some of your tools are no longer a good fit for your business. Might need a whole tool change out. Some of your customer expectations are not being met. You might have a new set of major requirements, like a whole new tool you need to add to the system. You can't keep up with the growth, demand, or the traffic. Customer service is getting stressed. Or you're finding that experience of, as we grow, so must our staff, and we're not being scalable anymore. It's starting to get more urgent. Something's going to give if you get to the point where you've got frequent customer-facing issues now, and you're getting the same sorts of complaints from the customers on a consistent basis. You might have compliance issues that have arisen, or security concerns that have come up and need to be addressed right away. Your resource issues start to be a problem where folks are turning over resource-wise, or you're losing vendors. And you might have regular system failures at this level of extreme. You're losing pace with the competition is the general sense here. And then when do we call in Winston Wolfe? I hope some of you get my pop culture references here. Customers aren't receiving their orders or services or key communications. That's an extreme. Systems are going down with some frequency. No one knows what is broken. We don't know what's working either. It's pretty common. You might have an increase in your resource turnover, loss of customers, loss of revenue. If you're at this point, it's time. It's well past time, honestly. But look for help and increase your budget. It makes sense to spend where you know you're going to be getting revenue back. And I saw a lot of hands go up for marketing when I talked through who was here in the room earlier. I don't think anybody questions a marketing budget. A lot of people still do question a tech budget. And it seems like there's a project mindset of once we pay for an application, we've bought it and it works forever. You've started a relationship with that application is the reality. And in some cases, that is mitigated by the fact that it might be software as a service, and they might be upgrading that for you all the time, keeping it compliant, keeping it secure, and making it better and improving it over time. But in most cases, what you've got is something that needs to evolve, and we all know tech moves fast. If it's not evolving, it's falling behind immediately. So ensure that you have that proper mindset. We need to invest in technology. If it's delivering on those promises, it's bringing money back to you. Then how do we make the changes we need to make? If we're at one of those extremes, you're probably in triage mode. We need to fix those things that are broken. We need to fill gaps that are causing operational issues or customer issues. You probably have to do some mending of relationships with customers and with partners at this point. Make sure you're compliant, make sure you're secure. Restoring revenue streams. Let's get the flow of money coming back into the organization. So that's what I would call triage. Once you get to a point where you're past that, we've stopped the bleeding, but we know there's still operating that needs to take place. Now I call it reactive. We still need to react to things as they happen, but we can start to prioritize and address improvements to the overall systems. We can remove some redundancy that might relieve the staff a little bit of some of the operational overhead, putting some automation in place for manual processes. Maybe even replacing legacy systems or replatforming, re-architecting, and bringing integrations into play. And then once that is done, and you're more in that sweet spot of the earlier stuff from the previous slide, you can be more proactive. And this is where you want to be putting your tech spend and your opportunity toward analyzing data, looking for those insights that are going to help you to give you an edge over the competition and keep a step ahead of technology all the time. Look for trends, understand what opportunities may exist, and start to run experiments. If you think something might be more successful, there are tools out there to help you just apply that to 10% of your audience. So you should start to run some experiments to see, can we improve our conversion rate? Can we improve our page load speed, et cetera? And there you have an opportunity to be more innovative. I do want to caution, don't be the shiny squirrel company. Don't be innovative just because something new came out. Look into how it is applicable to you as an organization And if you don't know how it might apply, talk to a subject matter expert. Talk to somebody that's not just excited about it, but who's implementing it and who's seeing both the shortcomings and the opportunities that exist within that new technology. ML and AI are a great example of that. A lot of people are very excited about machine learning and artificial intelligence. A lot of people don't have a reasonable application for that in their current structure. And so you really need to understand what's our strategy for this innovation before we go out and buy it. And then you can reach out to learn more. Ultimately, we provide consulting, strategy, enterprise architecture, which is kind of the different models that I was talking about up here. Everything down to digital marketing, implementation. We can do staff augmentation if you just have a project that needs a little bit more boost, and a lot more that we do. So ultimately, let us know how we can help you. These company examples that I used represent more like about 20 different companies that I've worked with, and not the last few years. And ultimately, we've used different pairings of these services in order to get them where they needed to go. And with that, I will say thank you and ask if there's any questions.